Beloveds, it is so good to be home. As you are likely aware, I returned in the beginning of August from a 3-month sabbatical. During that time, I did the essential work of recentering, renewing, and refreshing. As I prepared for these 3 brief months, I thought deeply about what I wanted to feel during this time. I wanted to feel energized, inspired, encouraged, and connected. Connected to far-flung loved ones, connected to the earth, and connected to my own spiritual center. I departed from the CVUU with tremendous confidence in the sabbatical team and the rest of the congregation. We have grown so much in the last 6 years, and I'm not only talking about numbers, though our number growth is tremendous. We've fleshed out our council and committee structure, we've expanded our lay leadership, and we've improved our organizational communication considerably. Even 3 years ago, I would not have felt that the CVUU was in a good enough position for me to take a sabbatical. But when I tell you that I never once felt uncertain about our capacity for shared ministry in the absence of a minister, I am speaking the truth. I want to take this time now to thank our sabbatical team, Dennis Harbaugh, Carolyn Hildebrandt, Heather Flory, and Mike Knapp, and Lynn Brandt, and Karen Impola. I wasn't here. I don't know. I'd like to thank Nancy. It was Betsy Brandt. I made a call because I wasn't sure if it was Lynn or Betsy. Betsy. We're giving her it was all Betsy. I also want to thank Nancy Grosskruger for her leadership in matters of pastoral care, and Mandy Booty and Karen Impola in their efforts to find engaging, inspiring speakers for worship. I know that these aren't the only folks who made Sabbatical possible, because all of you made Sabbatical possible, and because I'm sure I'm forgetting someone who did something tremendous, and again, because I wasn't here and I don't know exactly who did what. But I know that this was a group effort. So thank you so much for making space for me to have this time and for taking care of the CVUU in the last 3 months. And can we have some applause for those folks? I'm grateful forever. One of the funny things about ministry is the expectation that a minister be essentially and at their core a spiritual leader. Being a spiritual leader takes a lot of time. It's also a lot of pressure. I'm not sure I do it effectively constantly, but it's a really big part of the job. You need to engage consistently in your own personal spiritual practice. You need to seek out spiritual guidance, and you need to set out quiet time to gather your spiritual thoughts and form them into translatable, tangible messages. It's a lot of work and it's a lot of pressure in itself. But despite the expectation, ministers often don't have a lot of time for spiritual pursuits. We're very busy in committee meetings and program planning and fellowship and staff supervision, in putting out the day-to-day fires and chasing loose threads and trying to remember what day it is, because you actually work a very weird schedule. The only time I'm ever certain of what day it is on a Sunday. Although I kept track of the days when I was on sabbatical, and as soon as I started working again, I lost track. Sabbatical exists in part so that ministers can make time to do some of the spiritual seeking and spiritual renewal that they don't have time for in their day-to-day. Consider it a way to fill the buckets of sermon material that might have run a bit dry as the years have gone on. I divided my sabbatical time into 3 separate adventures. I spent early May in my favorite place, the Great Smoky Mountains in Tennessee, with my partner, my best friend, and my mom. There's something about the Great Smokies, though I have no ancestral connection there, and up until a few years ago had never even been to Tennessee, but there's something about that place that gives me a profound sense of home. I almost can't describe it. Part of this feeling, I'm sure, comes from how reminiscent the Smokies are to the Green Mountains in Vermont. And in fact, and I learned this just recently, the Great Smokies and the Green Mountains are actually a part of of the same mountain range. So they're connected to each other, which I think explains at least a little bit of the deep spiritual sense of being at home I get whenever I'm there. So I left Vermont about a year after I graduated from college when I moved to Connecticut for graduate school, and I was there for 4 years. Connecticut never felt like home. I moved to Iowa in November of 2015. It's actually October 31st, 2015, which was almost a decade ago. And you're all aware that Iowa has never really felt quite like home to me either. I'm just too East Coast for the Midwest, I think. And in recent years, even Vermont, in the time that I've returned to visit, has not felt like home. The town I grew up in is practically unrecognizable to me now, as gentrification has turned Main Street into a strip of bougie boutiques and breweries. I could not believe it when I got to Waterbury in July. Our downtown had paid parking. I will never pay to park in my own hometown. They're privately owned. Okay, I'm not going to get sidetracked. It was outrageous and infuriating, and I can't believe it that that's where Waterbury, Vermont is now. So I felt weirdly unmoored for a long time. And so I latch onto this feeling that I get whenever I'm in the Great Smokies. And I knew that beginning my sabbatical there would center me for the months ahead. In June, I embarked on a 5,000-mile solo road trip. Now, many of you might know that I didn't get my driver's license until I moved to Iowa, until I was nearly 30. There are lots of reasons for that. But when I finally got my license, I discovered that I love to drive, and I really love to drive by myself. So I began in Okoboji, Iowa, and I drove all the way to the Redwoods in California and back. I can't even begin to describe the adventures I experienced. I'm going to share a few pictures of my trip during this sermon, and no doubt you'll hear me preach on those experiences many times over in the coming months. I also brought a photo album that'll be down in the fellowship hall during coffee hour if you care to page through it. I didn't take nearly enough pictures, but the ones that I have made it into a photo album. So most of this sermon is going to be a show and tell, focusing on my June road trip with a few lessons learned along the way. Now, I want you to consider these lessons to be lighthearted in nature, at least a little bit facetious, certainly not gospel, comforting to my own spirit and maybe to yours too. So we can bring up that first picture, Steve. Steve is doing my little slideshow today. So this first picture and the second picture too is from the Badlands National Park in South Dakota. I arrived there around 8 p.m. after driving the 6 or so hours from Iowa's Great Lake region. It had been raining hard off and on as I was arriving, and the sky was clearing just as I made my way to the gate to pay to enter the park. The park ranger informed me that I was about to view the Badlands at their very grandest, at golden hour following a rainstorm. They don't get a lot of rain in that area. And so he encouraged me to see as much of the park as I could while it appeared in this spectacular and very special way. The views were practically otherworldly, and I felt profoundly lucky to have arrived at this perfect time. I felt so lucky, in fact, that when I woke up the next morning to glaring sunshine for a hike in the park, I was a little bit let down by the change in the surroundings. All of the color had kind of disappeared from the landscape, and the bright sun made everything look very gray. Steve, you can go to that next picture. So if there is a lesson there by that feeling of being a little bit let down, maybe it's this. Take note when you've witnessed a place or a thing at its likely most beautiful and profound, and then maybe move on. Best to suspend the image in your memories than be disappointed by a less photogenic reality, maybe. Also, the hike that I took that next day, I pulled a muscle in my thigh so badly that I was hobbling around in pain for a good 5 days. I felt it when it happened. And I had all these hiking plans. So maybe I should have just left while I was ahead. So we can go to the next picture. This picture, maybe go to the one after that, Steve, and then go right back to this one. Okay, this is a peacock. There is a tiny, tiny town in the interior of the Badlands National Park. It is called Interior. About 20 people live there, and it's within the borders of the park. So imagine my shock as I was driving through this town and I spotted this peacock. I yelped in surprise. I thought for just a minute I was maybe experiencing some sort of road-weary hallucination. I then wondered if I had somehow missed the information that peacocks were native to South Dakota. You can go back to the other one. I just think it's such a cool. You can see his tail and he was fanning it out. I also told my brother that when I sent him these pictures and I said, did you know that peacocks are native to the Badlands National Park? And he said, I had no idea. I said, they're not. I later learned that peacock belonged to an elder who lived in the town of Interior. And all night long, peacocks are very loud. I heard him all night long in the campground I was staying in. So the lesson here is to look out for and relish in the delight of the unexpected, because life can be just so funny and so surprising. So from the Badlands, I made my way to the Crazy Horse Memorial in Crazy Horse, South Dakota. This is also where Mount Rushmore is located, and I am very proud to report that I achieved my goal of never so much as setting eyes on the Mount Rushmore monument. I have a lot of feelings about that monument. I'm not going to get into them now. I didn't want to see it. I had come very specifically to visit Crazy Horse, and that memorial site is one of the most profound spots of cultural preservation and celebration that I've ever visited. I spent the whole day there and the rest of the time exploring South Dakota, which I found surprisingly beautiful. I realized that I'd never seen an antelope before. I kept spotting them all over the plains in South Dakota. And I was like, what are those funny, tiny deer with the furry ears? And then when I got to Colorado to see a friend, she told me, yes, those are antelope. Those are antelope. More than once while I was in South Dakota, because I spent a couple of days there, I was asked if I was a local, which is a huge compliment for any tourist. And the lesson here is to take every opportunity whenever you are invited to learn about other cultures and to discover what you can do from your own place of privilege to respect and preserve them. So this next picture is of the Sri Sri Radha Krishna Temple in Spanish Fork. Oh, that's actually that's my friend Jay. We'll talk about them in a minute. Nope. There it is. We'll go back and forth. It's all right. This is the Sri Sri Radha Krishna Temple in Spanish Fork, Utah, which is right outside of Salt Lake City. The temple is open to visitors. It's a massive place. They have animals, including peacocks, which was very funny. It was starting to feel a bit of a theme. And a large sanctuary space where they meditate and chant and do yoga. And they have a $10 vegetarian buffet that was really good. I was warmly greeted by the monks who live and work at the temple, and they were eager to share their religion with me. The lesson here is a really easy one for Unitarian Universalists, which is spiritual openness. Remain open to all pathways by which we come to spiritual understanding, but be wary of them too, right? Where reason and spirituality meet. That's in our mission statement. Hold on to your reason and your spirituality with an equal importance, taking care to leave your mind open to the inexplicable and your heart open to the rational. Followers of the Hare Krishna believe that our souls, the true essence of who we are, reincarnate at the conclusion of each lifetime, taking an intentional journey always towards enlightenment. Our bodies, the Krishna teaches, are entirely inconsequential. They're the least interesting things about who we are. The body is simply the physical vehicle by which your soul experiences the material realm on its journey to enlightenment. I like that. As someone who's struggled with body image my whole life and who gets very frustrated with the chronic back pain that I have and some of the things I've dealt with as I've been aging, I really like this idea that the body is just a vessel and that what is inside of us, our souls, are the most important thing. So Steve, I'll have you go back now to that picture of me and my friend. This is my friend Jay, and Jay is the minister at the Unitarian Universalist congregation in Salt Lake City, Utah. I arrived in Salt Lake to discover joyfully that it just so happened to be Pride weekend. Yay! I attended the longest Pride parade I have ever been to. And I tapped out and went home after the UUs marched by me. I'd worn the wrong shoes. It was so hot. The lesson here is to always be prepared to attend any party you might be invited to at any moment. Wear proper footwear. Stay hydrated. And tap out before you get so exhausted it screws up all the rest of your plans. So the next picture is taken from a scenic vantage point on a 12-mile hiking trail that takes you to Shoshone Falls in Twin Falls, Idaho. Now, you can drive right to the falls, or you can do things the hard way and walk along the paved 100% sun-exposed 6-mile one-way, 6 miles back trail to get you to the parking lot that everyone else has driven to. I chose to do things the hard way that day, and most days, actually, on my big solo adventure. The lesson here is that it's okay to do things solely for the plot. Do it for the plot. And to always wear sunscreen. Again, here we are, sunscreen. And to always bring plenty of water. Again, water, more than you think you will need. Shoshone Falls is called the Niagara of the West by the people that live there. And while I don't think it's nearly as impressive as Niagara Falls, that's just a personal opinion, I was very impressed with myself for taking that stupid long hike. Early on in my trip, I got a call. I was somewhere in Wyoming and I got a call from my friend Ingria. Ingria was essentially my destination for the trip. I needed somewhere to go. And so it was Destination Ingria. It gave me a sense of purpose, even if I knew that really the journey was the whole point. So I had planned to visit her in Yakima, Washington, where she was preparing for a summer internship. She's in law school, and she's studying specifically indigenous land rights. And she had an internship with a tribe in Yakima, but she usually lives in Seattle. An unexpected family emergency meant that she was still going to be in Seattle, and so I needed to change course, not insignificantly, to meet her there. I'd never been to Seattle, and it was very fun to do all of the touristy things. Here's a picture of me at the gum wall. It was disgusting. It was so gross. I'm still like a very COVID cautious person. I'm kind of a germaphobe. So this was gross. And I posted some pictures on Facebook, and there were some people, I think some of you, who were literally asking me to take them down because it was just so gross. And so when Ingria and I got to this gum wall, there was a giant gumball machine at the base of the wall if you hadn't brought your own. And we were standing at this gumball machine, which even just touching it was like grossing me out. And we were making these exclamations of revulsion. And the man behind us said, "Don't think too much about it. Just buy a ticket and get on the ride." So that's the lesson, right? Get over yourself, buy a ticket, and get on the ride. So the next picture is a family photo taken by Luna the dog. And those are my friends, Tim and Ingria. And some of you might recall that you actually met Tim and Ingria maybe 2 summers ago. They were taking their own epic van life road trip, and they made a stop in Iowa just for me. And they came to church on Labor Day Sunday. That was a couple of years ago. And they both send their regards and love from Seattle. So the change in my route meant that I was able to visit another place I hadn't planned to, and that was the Redwoods in California. That's a lesson in flexibility and a reminder to never get too attached to the plans that you've made, that you miss out on something that could be even better. The Redwoods were the most profound spiritual company I have ever had the honor of being in the presence of. I believe that all trees are sentient beings, but these trees specifically, it felt like I was hiking in the presence of these ancient creatures who had a wisdom that I could never comprehend or understand. I felt so insignificant and so humbled by nature. And I have never been to a place before that felt like it was out of time, right? Like this linear time that we all live in, this 7 days a week, it doesn't exist among these creatures that have been there for eons and eons and eons. And I was like hobbling along on this hike. A lot of the last 3 months has been a little bit of an indictment on how some of my other overfunctioning has impacted my strength and my stamina and my flexibility. And I'm coming back with a renewed commitment to take better care of myself, take better care of this vessel that I'm carting around until my soul moves on. I was almost totally alone on this 6-mile hike. I was on the Boy Scout trail, and I stopped frequently to just take in this profound silence around me. It felt like I was in another place, like I wasn't really even on the planet anymore. I wish that I could have bottled up this experience to take it with me. And unlike so many of the places that I passed through and felt contented to, probably never return to again, I can't wait to get back to the redwoods. The lesson here is to seek out experiences that connect you to something bigger than yourself. And rather than falling into despair at your insignificance, marvel at the opportunity of existing in the world at this time, in this place at all. As I turned the corner in California and began my long journey home, I began to get a little bit antsy. I'd been on the road for 3 weeks at this point, and I really missed my partner, and I really missed my bed, and I was really starting to miss my home routines. I had anticipated this shift, that I was going to get antsy, I was going to get homesick, I was going to get, pretty anxious to just get back. But I didn't anticipate the series of scheduling snafus and small disappointments that crowded together as I began to make my way back to Iowa. I arrived too late to truly explore a few of the places I had been looking forward to, and then weather started to create all sorts of challenges. But one of the places that I had been anticipating seeing on my way back were the Salt Flats that are about an hour and a half outside of Salt Lake City, Nevada. I'd spent the night in Reno and planned to make my way to the Salt Flats, a vast desert expanse on the road. It's on public land, and it is salt, so it's bright white. And it's an incredibly cool place for an epic photo shoot. So I encountered a series of disappointing dead ends in Reno, though I thought Reno was really cool, actually. It's like Vegas, if Vegas cared to preserve their history and was about, 15, 20% the size of Vegas. So I was late leaving Reno, and then I hit some traffic, and I reached the Salt Flats hours and hours later than I had anticipated. And as I drove my way on the straight, stark road, you take this exit, and we think the roads are straight in Iowa. I have never driven on a straighter road in my life. I was driving on this straight, stark road, and an epic thunderstorm broke out and began to crash around my car. And it was crashing so hard that my Highlander was swaying side to side in the wind. And I couldn't really see the road because the salt, whips up. And if it rains, they tell you don't go on the salt flats because they turn into mud and your car is going to get stuck and no one is coming to save you because there's no cell service out there anyway. So as I'm driving on this road and I'm heading to the salt flats, I started laughing. And then I was laughing pretty hysterically. I got a little hysterical. It was just so perfect, right? This series of misadventures. And here I was fighting my way through the rain to the parking lot of the flats. So when I arrived, the wind and the rain was way too powerful to get out of the car. I tried, and the wind was like pushing me back into my car, and I was waiting, for it to calm down or break just a little bit. And the rain broke just enough for a brief, spectacular sunset. You can go to the next slide, Steve. So I was grumpy, right, that I was not going to get this epic photo shoot that I had planned on. And it was at this point that I spotted this bride and groom who were frantically attempting to take a few good photographs before the wind and the rain took over again. And I don't know their story, right? But they were in this moving truck. They had like 3 different vehicles with them. And there were a bunch of props in the moving truck. And then this is their photographer here, who was like desperately trying to cover her like very expensive camera. And the dress the bride was wearing was this giant, poofy white ball gown that was getting soaked. And her groom was like kind of trying to keep it up and out of the mud. It was just such a disaster, and I felt so bad for them. So obviously I was not the only one who wanted epic pictures that day, and their predicament really put mine in perspective, right? And that's the lesson there. Sometimes our plans don't work out and we miss out on things we've been looking forward to. But almost always you can find someone whose plans have gone even more awry than yours, and they are even more disappointed than you will ever be. And things aren't actually that bad. Also, a side note, there's a there's a gas station like 3 miles out as you're coming out of the Salt Flats. And it's in this totally like remote place. And I needed gas, but the gas there, because it's in the middle of nowhere, even though you can go to the next exit, the gas was like $6 a gallon, which I think I had paid that in California, but I was like, I'm not doing that again. Well, also that gas station was an Indian restaurant, which was very strange and funny. Like, it's just this full Indian restaurant in the middle of nowhere. And I got a very late night chai because I had to make it even farther that night. So, weird, unexpected stuff everywhere. So, and I spent the last 3 days of my trip in Colorado Springs, where you might know I try to go at least once a year because I have a dear friend there who lives with her husband and their now 3-year-old son. He might be almost 4 now. And it was a lovely conclusion to a tremendous adventure. I have so much to share with you in the coming months. More stories from my sabbatical and words of encouragement and insight and a little guidance as the CVUU continues to grow and to change, to transform as our UU values encourage us to do. The first draft of this sermon was over 10 pages long. And so there's a lot that I can save for another day. My energy is renewed, and I hope that you're feeling that way too. I also have come back with firmer and more defined boundaries. I've reflected a lot on the last 6 years, and I see evidence of my own overfunctioning all over the place. And it's not good for me, and it's really not good for you either, because if your minister is burnt out and exhausted, you're not getting your ministry at its very best, right? So I'm thinking about the ways to protect my own bandwidth, to take care of my health, my physical health, my emotional health, my spiritual health. And I'm looking into the future. And I see changes in the way this congregation is ministered to and what the role of the minister looks like. And that's because we're growing, right? I see a call for lay leaders to continue to grow within their roles, and for new leadership to emerge. We are desperate for some new leadership. We have so many incredible ideas in this congregation. I hear about them all the time, and we need folks who are willing to put those ideas into reality, to bring them about. And I'm thinking too, as we're going through some major staff changes, which I know we are all very sad about, but I bless our staff as they depart us. They've grown to their capacities within the roles. Their careers have developed and changed, and it's time for them, to move on. And that's okay. It means that we're facing some major challenges. We have 3 staff positions to fill. I'm thinking about the ways that we can change and shift these staff roles. Let's get creative. I'm very positive about the future. And I hope that you'll take this journey with me, with joy and with curiosity, right? Curiosity over fear. I'm thinking about beloved community. I'm thinking about change and growth and opportunity and endless possibility. I'm thinking about hope over fear. I'm thinking about how we turn the stranger into a friend and a friend into chosen family. I'm thinking urgently about the present moment and the challenges that are right in front of us. I'm stretching out of my comfort zone. I'm imagining what is possible, and I'm inviting you to come along with me. We begin to change the world by strengthening the communities of which we are already a part. And in turn, we begin to repair the fractured community of the great human family. We are called into this beloved community where our spirits are nurtured and sustained and inspired. We are called to spread the good news of Unitarian Universalism and to be light bearers in the dark corners right in front of us. We are called to our own journeys of the soul, where we travel in the direction of our highest selves. And we are called always back to the home we have in one another's hearts. I invite you to come along with me. Let's embark on this next adventure together. Amen and blessed be.